Yep, that's us recording now.
Brilliant. Well, welcome everybody. It's great to have so many people here for the second of our Mooting lectures and the precursor to getting on to the actual workshops where we're going to have real sort of interactive sessions. So great feedback from all the team about last week's introductory lecture. Today, we're going to move away from the introduction to law into an introduction to mooting itself. So you're going to get lots and lots of tips from the team today. And I would encourage you to use the chat function as much as you can to ask lots and lots of questions. And then Kelsey, Louise, Scarlett, and Rory, they'll be jumping back in and giving you lots of feedback and top tips. And a really exciting development next week, we're going to be filming a sort of mock moot, and we're going to be using that and putting that on the YouTube channel in 2 weeks' time. So lots and lots of interactive activities. We're really trying really hard to sort of build up your skills with regard to public speaking and indeed to mooting. And I hope you have a very successful lecture now. Ask lots and lots of questions. And now I'll hand over to Libby for a bit of housekeeping.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, a very warm welcome from us all in Dundee. Just a couple of tips. The Q&A is a great place for you guys to ask questions of the team. They are going to be using the chat function a little bit more to ask you questions. So please feel free to answer their questions in the chat function, but ask your own questions in the Q&A and then they will moderate them. I'm going to leave my email address for you all and my WhatsApp number before I disappear off so that you can ask any sort of more detailed questions or any questions not relevant to this session of me as well. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to your student team in Dundee. Over to you guys.
Hello everyone. So as Peter explained, this is an introduction to mooting. We're going to kind of take you through how the internals competition is going to be run a little bit, the skills you need and kind of what this workshop is. Obviously, we understand that this is an introduction and it's quite a new thing that you're all facing. So don't worry if you don't understand anything, please just ask us any questions and we will be developing what we're talking about today over the next 2 weeks. So I think we'll start off with Scarlett, who's going to go through the learning aims, if that's all right.
Hi everyone. So like Kelsey said, I'm just going to run through the learning aims for today. So we want to learn who the parties are in a moot, who's participating, understand what a bundle is and how it's created, identify what skills are necessary for mooting, for successful mooting, how we can construct strong legal arguments that will help us win the moot, and then establish what etiquette is actually necessary for the moot as well.
So I don't know if we briefly explained last week what mooting is, but if you don't know, mooting is a mock court appeal case. Basically, students take the role of counsel in presenting legal arguments before a judge or panel of judges. The teams present submissions for each party and seek to persuade the judge that their interpretation of the law is correct. Each moot has 2 teams competing against one another, with the winner being decided both on advocacy skill and also legal knowledge. During their arguments, students will be asked questions by the judge. It's important to remember when you get a moot, although it seems like the side you've been given maybe is not the best side, the problem is designed so that both teams will have a good argument that they can both use, and it should be fairly equal. So the parties are the appellants, who establish and argue the grounds of the appeal and that the decision at first instance should be overturned, whereas the respondents argue the grounds of the response and that the decision at first instance should be upheld. The judge is who the mooters present their submissions to, and they will ask questions and decide the winner. The judge isn't there to kind of scare you. He really wants to know what you're trying to say and what your point is. So don't worry too much about that if you think they're going to be scary. And the clerk is just there to introduce the court and also keep track of time during your submissions. So for the internals competition, this is the order and also the times that people will be given. So everyone will have 7 minutes to speak. We'll start with the senior appellant, who will introduce the court and all the parties involved, and then we'll go to the junior appellant, and then the senior respondent and junior respondent.
Hi everyone, hope you're all well. So I'm just going to, before I begin, I'm going to give you 4 examples of what poor advocacy is. So this is what to avoid. Now, Chief Justice William Rehnquist is a very well-known leading judge in England and Wales, and he gave this advice to students interested in mooting on how to ensure that they get their argument across well. First of all, don't be a lector. Now, this is someone who simply reads his argument. He doesn't, he only reads it fully script to script, and he doesn't try to bring in his own views or his own opinions to the case. What an experienced mooter will do is he will tend to read only from flashcards or without even aid. So it means continuing to maintain good eye contact and showing that you're having a conversation with the judge. You then have the debating champion. This is someone who has a strong grasp of the case, but fails to listen and properly answer questions from the judge. It's important to remember that a moot is not a debate, and you need to answer judicial intervention in a clear and concise manner. You aren't necessarily expressing your own opinions, but rather expressing your case and why your side believes that the case should be followed in a certain way. You've also got the Casey Jones. Now, this is my favorite. This is someone who speaks very, 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 very quickly, doesn't slow down, and often gets muddled up as well. The best way to deal with your moot is to speak slow, calmly, and precisely. Make sure you pick passengers up the way and that the judge isn't getting left behind. Finally, you have the spellbinder. And this is someone who relies on rhetoric rather than careful analysis. For example, if you make a very emotional argument, the judge is less likely to be interested in this compared to if you're setting out cold stone facts on the case. So those are the 4 to avoid. We'll now talk a little bit about what to do in your moot to be successful. So in every moot, you have to prepare a bundle. Now, this is a collection of cases and or legislation you'll be relying upon in your moot. Each competition has a number of different authorities you're allowed to bring. This includes statutes and case law. And when we get the internal rules out to you all, it will clearly set out how many legislation and cases you can bring. During your speech, you'll need to direct the judge to sections of your bundle. This is through highlighting and tabbing. We're going to be doing electronic bundles this year, and we will be going over in greater detail as the weeks go by how to prepare and complete your bundle. It's important to make your bundle as clear as possible and very structured. What you want is the judge to be easily directed to each section in each case so that they're not getting lost or confused as you get through your submission. Finally, you also need to contain a skeleton argument. This is a brief overview on the cases you are using and the arguments you are putting forward, and the moot problem as well. Now, the judge is the person with the most authority in the room, and during the moot, you must be very polite and professional when speaking to the judge. They may not have judged a moot before, or they may have judged multiple moots. So their experience can vary when they're asking questions and when they are judging. I think it's also important to know that every judge has his or her own style. So don't be surprised if you are judged by one judge and then judged by another, and they're completely different. Some ask lots of questions, some don't ask as many questions. So everyone's style is different. When you are mooting, the mooter should follow the judge's lead and pick up on signals that they don't understand or are not following the argument. For example, if you're doing a moot and you're seeing the judges very quickly trying to find your tabs, or you can see he's looking quite confused, then you should try to slow down and make sure that you get the judge back on track. Finally, always make sure to briefly offer the facts of the case before the judge. They may never have heard it before, or they may say that they have heard the case, so you don't need to go over it, but always offer and it will get you bonus points. So when you are addressing the judge, it is either my lord, my lady, depending if they're male or female, or your lordship, your ladyship. during your submission. So for example, if I was addressing the judge, I would say, if I could direct your ladyship to page 6 of the digital bundle, that's me directing the judge to what case I was using in the bundle. And again, it makes it very easy for her to go to page 6 and begin reading the case. Make sure you refer the judge correctly, and if you're not sure what they would like to be referred, ask them at the start before your moot starts. It's really important cultures to make sure you follow the correct pronouns and the correct correct submissions. And it will also show you a lot of the time if someone has simply written a speech and they're reading off the speech, if they're going my lord, my lady without checking who the judge is, it often shows that they're just reading, because a lot of the time you only find out on the day if you've got a male judge or a female judge. The judge will be the one who decides whether you win or lose. Showing them a lot of respect is great use to you. And it's also important, if you do lose a moot, continue to show respect to the judge. You can ask questions on why you lost. You can find out, how you can improve, but don't get angry at the judge. Don't get frustrated, and don't kind of question the judge on his judgment, because at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for you to kind of learn on what mistakes you've made and what improvements you can do for next time. Finally, and this is key, never interrupt a judge. If the judge is asking you a question, for example, if he asks you why you chose a case or what argument you're making, always wait for them to wait patiently for them to finish, and never assume what their question will be. So, for example, if the judge is halfway asking you a question and then you say, "Oh, but this is what I meant," don't do that, because he could be asking a completely different question. You've just cut him off. So always make sure you wait for him to finish. So during your submission, the judges will usually ask you some questions. There may be simple questions, for example, which court the case appears in, and whether they are precedent over the moot problem. That's again really important, that you understand the hierarchy of the court, so you understand which court overrules the others. The judge may also want you to clarify issues, expand on a point, and discuss the relevance of a case. If your submission is going well, then the judge will tend to ask you more questions to see how well you know the law. So if you're getting asked really complicated questions, it's a good sign, because the judge is testing you more and more and more to try to kind of get you more points to show that you really have a good grasp on the case. Also, you can ask the judge, if you don't understand the question, you can say, "My lady, would it be possible for you to rephrase the question?" That's absolutely acceptable. Just make sure you say it in a certain way. Don't say, "My lady, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you please explain it in a simpler way?" That will not go down well. So always just ask them to rephrase the question. What never to do is don't argue with the judge or show frustration what is said or asked. Never sigh when the judge is asking you a question or is making a point. Don't interrupt the judge, as we've said before. And the judge, again, is the one who decides whether you win or lose. So show them respect, and respect what decision they reach.
Can everyone hear me okay? I'm just going to talk for a little while about court etiquette. So when you're in a courtroom, or in a moot, sorry, you're meant to act as if you are in a courtroom. It's meant to be a formal setting, and it's really trying to copy what a real life courtroom would be like. So they're very formal, and a moot tries to emulate that. Counsel should keep that etiquette appropriate for the setting. So that does on occasion mean acting very formally, or all the time, sorry, I mean acting very formally. When we say counsel as well, I'm not sure if this has been covered yet, but we mean the competitors, the ones who are arguing the case. That's what counsel means. But yeah, they should keep their etiquette and behavior appropriate for the courtroom setting. It's important to remember that your competitors are in the same situation as you, and you have to be respectful and courteous to them. A lot of the time they might even be people you know, your friends. So you've got to keep respectful to them, because at the end of the day, you're all in the same boat, you're all doing the same thing. It's not the end of the world who wins or loses. They're not your enemies, they're your competitors. So just some useful tips for remembering court etiquette is remember to use formal English when you're speaking, wear appropriate courtroom attire, try not to use slang, try not to say things like cool in the moot, try and keep it very formal. Refer to your competitors, the opposing counsel, as learned colleagues, learned friends, or the respondents or the appellants. You could call them the learned counsel across the bar, your learned friends across the bar, things like that, just keeping it formal. Never call them, you know, those people or, you know, the enemy or whatever. Just keep it very formal all the time. Make sure you speak slowly and clearly. That's going to help you for a lot of reasons. It's going to help you think out your argument, but it's also really gives you a chance to think about what you're saying and the etiquette you're using to make sure it is formal enough for a moot. And be professional and respectful. If you're rebutting something that the opposition have said, then and you're trying to argue back against it, then you don't need to be nasty to them, be nasty about the argument. You can respectfully put forward your argument, and that is what etiquette's about, just being completely respectful and appropriate for the setting. Try not to say I believe or I think. You have to act like everything you say has been proven, it's certain. Go for I submit, or the appellant submit, the respondent submit, I argue, we argue, things like that. If you think or believe it's not as certain, doesn't bode as well. A lot of the time this comes up when the judge asks the question and someone might say to her, I think this, my lady, and that doesn't usually go down well because, you know, you argue this, you submit it, you're not just thinking it, you have evidence to back it up. And how the moot will be marked. So each moot will have, or each competition, will have its own mark scheme, and the judge will consider lots of things. These are things the judge will usually consider. The analysis of the law and the problem, how well the law that's been chosen applies to the problem at hand. The structure of the argument, whether the counsel's everywhere or whether they have a clear structured argument and have clearly thought it through. Oral presentation, whether counsel can speak slowly, speak clearly, speak well. It is one of the key factors of mooting. Teamwork, you'll usually be in pairs, and it is so important that you can work well as a team because you're arguing one thing together. So you have to be able to work well as a team, and the judge will be able to tell very easily if there's been teamwork or not. Relevance of authority, so whether the correct law has been applied, whether the cases do apply to the case at hand, or whether they're completely out of nowhere. Speaking skills, use of etiquette, like I was just saying, remaining respectful throughout the moot, no matter what, treating the judge with great respect. You'll also be marked on your response to questions. This is a really important one. It shows, because responding to questions tends to show your knowledge of the law as well, and whether you have truly structured your argument well. A good response to questioning can really bump up some marks. The effectiveness of rebuttals, if your opposing counsel have said something or included something in their skeleton argument and you are able to rebut that, that will usually be very effective, because it shows that you're listening, you can think on your feet. And also use of time. Judges won't take kindly to a submission that's meant to be 10 minutes being 2 minutes, and equally they won't take kindly to a submission that was meant to be 5 minutes being 10 minutes. But you can do all of those things and do them really well and still lose on the law. So you may win the law and lose the moot, or lose the law and win the moot. Is that what I just said? But what really matters is winning the moot. That really shows your legal arguments, whether you've understood what's going on. A lot of the times in moot problems, there is a clear side that has the upper hand, but that does not mean by any means that you are if you're on the other side on the back foot. You can still win the moot and do really well. It's about the arguments you put forward. So the counsel who've made the best legal arguments and scored the most points will win the moot. even if the law isn't on their side. I believe in the internal competition, the team will be awarded a mark out of 100. And when you're prepping, just consider all of the things mentioned on the left, because that will be what you're marked on. I think we're all going to go through some examples of court etiquette now, and maybe you could pop in the chat whether they are good examples of court etiquette or poor examples of court etiquette. So if I said to a judge, "My lady, please turn to page 4 of the bundle to see the relevant sections of the legislation highlighted in yellow," would that be good court etiquette or poor court etiquette? Or if you think it's somewhere in between, feel free to say that as well. Thank you. Oh, we've got multiple people typing out. Yeah, good. That is very good court etiquette. It's clean. It tells the judge exactly what where they need to go. It directs them really well, and she can get there really easily. What about the people over there said this law does not apply, but it does? What do we think of that? We're getting mainly bad, but with the occasional good. Someone was right there. They said disrespectful. Absolutely. You have to refer to the opposition correctly as learned colleagues. Rory has his hand up.
No, I was just saying perhaps an alternative way you could say that.
We actually are going through alternatives on the next slide. So
those next. Oh, right, we've got those next. We'll go over that. Oh, someone's put the hand on. Does anyone have an alternative they would suggest, if you want to put that in the chat, if anyone's got an idea how you could possibly rephrase it?
Mm-hmm. If anyone's thinking of that, in the meantime, what does everyone think of Your Honour? What you're saying is ridiculous. General consensus there seems to be bad, disrespectful. Correct, don't tell the judge what they're saying is ridiculous. Also, we don't tend to use Your Honour. Oh, we've got some examples now popping up. We've got some really good examples. So the people who said you're my learned colleagues over there, my learned colleagues across the bar, things like that, perfect. As far as Your Honour, we don't tend to say Your Honour in English jurisdiction. We say my lady, my lord. But apart from that, the rest, that correction is really well done. What does everyone think of this one? If it pleases the court, I wish to direct your lordship to the following case. Yep, it's good, it's perfect, it keeps it clean, keeps it respectful to the judge. And is there one more? And what about this? I think everyone should look at this law. Everyone who's saying bad, do you think you could rephrase that? I'll give everyone some time. I know it takes a minute to type. Someone said the fifth one is unprofessional. Yeah. Someone replaced think with argue. That's good. We commanding, the same way someone said that it's commanding, that is also bad. Yeah. We've got some really good suggestions here. If we go on to the next slide and we can have a look at what we've said were maybe some good ways of rephrasing it. So we've said for the first one, instead of saying the people over there should have said this law does not apply, but it does, we've said that maybe counsel could say, my learned friends from across the bar have submitted that this area of law is inapplicable. I submit to your ladyship that the law applies here because, and then you're also getting in some reasoning and rebuttal. The next one, Your Honour, what you're saying is ridiculous. Instead, I think someone said something very similar to this. My lady, I respectfully submit that this line of reasoning does not apply here. And this final one is maybe a little bit more tricky. We would suggest something like, if it pleases your ladyship, I will direct the court to the following piece of legislation found in the bundle at page whatever. So when you are asking the judge to look at law, make sure you direct them to the bundle and direct them, signpost it step by step. But really well done. Very impressed with everyone in the chat. You know a lot more than I did when I first came to law school. But yeah, that is some examples of court etiquette and how it can be used.
I should be going through some of the research. So well-prepared legal research is key for a successful mooting submission. At university level, you'll have access to legal databases where you'll conduct most of your legal research. But for the purpose of this competition, you'll be able to find all the cases within the textbook provided, and we will circulate the full case report for you to use. So first off, it's important to think about what side, if you're the appellant or the respondent. So the appellant's goal would be to develop the points of appeal, and the majority of the appellant's case will be about developing the positive case for their side. Whereas the respondent would seek to deconstruct points of appeal and focus on persuading the court that the earlier court's decision was correct and should stand. So then you should look to the problem and find the area of law it's on. For example, if it's on tort, look to your tort textbook, and the set reading for this will provide a basis. So then, often in a moot problem, there will be case law, which the appellant is basing the appeal on. And this would be the first case that you research. So then you should just start off by ensuring you have a proper understanding of the main issues in the mooting problem. For example, and then you should split the points of appeal with your teammate. For example, the junior appellant could research appeals 1 and 2, and the senior appellant could focus on appeal 3. This would reduce your workload and make the argument clearer for the judge. So a few helpful tips are, first of all, we'll set the limits of cases for you as we get closer to the internals competition, but just be aware you'll have a limited number of cases. So make sure your cases are really advance your case and your legal argument. So then basically avoid referencing from the textbook, which is not a legal authority. You can utilize the textbook to develop your understanding of a case or legislation, but you must quote the judgment in a moot. And then another important thing to know is to ensure your cases are from higher up courts. So if you refer back to the court structure from the previous lecture, and you'll be able to find if cases are binding on the court, which, as you remember from last week, binding cases are case law that the court must follow. So a case will be binding if it's been decided in a higher court. So now I'll move on to some key terminology. So a moot is a mock appellate trial on a disputed point of law. And the most important thing that the judge is really looking for is your application of the law and your resourcefulness and creativity of your argument. And then your authorities, so we've got your cases, legislation, or other legal sources that are used to back up a legal argument. And as I've previously said, a binding persuasive cases will be strongest to back up your argument. A rebuttal, so the counsel can submit an argument which directly contradicts or undermines opposition's argument. And the counsel are the barristers, so the lawyers acting in a moot. And bundle is the prepared document or folder of all authorities that the council intends to use with the relevant sections highlighted. And a clear and organised bundle will be essential for the judge to be able to easily follow along with your case. So the appellant is the appealing party who is arguing that the decision should be overturned. The respondent is the responding party who are arguing that the decision was correct. And the judge at first instance is the judge who has presided over the court where the initial decision was made. So the council may argue that the judge's decision was correct or incorrect. And your submission is a speech that you'll give to the judge.
So now I think we're gonna go over the questions to last week. If you all had an opportunity to look at them and maybe answer them, if you want to put them in the chat.
I was just going to pause for a minute before
Yep.
we go on to answering questions and ask if there are any questions for us about what we've said so far, because I know it's quite like a load of information to receive all at once. So if you do have any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat or in the Q&A thing now, and we can answer them before we go on. Did you all get a chance to do last week's questions? Well, we know at least one person did, so that was perfect. Ethan, it's all on you. But I'll let Kelsey take it back.
Okay, so
we didn't have any questions.
Does anyone know the answer to the first question, what judicial precedent is? Don't worry if you don't know, this is all a learning opportunity, so feel free to put any answer in the chat. I can't see them if someone else reads to me what they are.
Someone said judicial precedent is using the ratio decidendi of a former case to resolve a current one.
Yeah, very good. So I've just kind of got a similar answer here, but yeah, basically that the judge must follow previously decided cases where the facts are sufficiently similar. When a court makes a decision, the court and all other courts beneath it are bound by that decision, except in limited circumstances, such as distinguishing the facts. Occasionally, you will find that some cases have been completely overruled due to a new application of law or that a new legislation has been brought in. So you kind of have to be careful and make sure that you're not using a really old case, which is actually no longer applicable, even if it was in a very high court, such as the Supreme Court.
We've had a few more people giving very correct answers, just saying that decisions of former judges are binding, things like that. Well done, guys. But we've had a couple of more answers to that.
Very good. Does anyone know what a law report is?
Someone said a law report is a collection of old cases, and someone else has said law reports are a series of books that contain judicial opinions from a selection of case law decided by courts.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they usually are books. When we do uni, we actually look at a lot of law reports online. So there are quite a few famous ones like the weekly law reports, the UK Supreme Court cases, those are ones. Some of the higher courts do publish their own law reports, so they tend not to be published in books, but on their website. So it's a record of the judicial decision on a point of law which sets precedent, includes the submissions from the parties, the judgment of the court, and the outcome. I think there's a spelling mistake there. During your the only section that you will be quoting from is the judgment. Please do not quote the lawyers, because those have no legal authority and we don't want to hear about them. They may make some very good points, but they're not a legal authority, unfortunately. So the next question, how important are cases as a source of law? Are there some cases that are more important than others?
I think everyone's just typing away at the minute.
Don't worry, take as long as you need.
Yeah.
There are some like quite famous cases that we as law students come across all the time, and you're like, oh, not that one again, because sometimes they make various points about different parts of law, which can be really interesting.
Yeah, sometimes you see the same judge's name appear over and over again in different cases. We've not got anyone say anything just yet. Well, if we focus on the second part, do you guys think some cases are more important than others?
I think, say, if you got like a case about, I'm trying to think, don't know, something like a road traffic offence, it might not be, well, semi-important, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to have a huge impact on all the law. And a lot of things like that tend to be based in legislation, not case law. But there are a couple big sections of English law that are fully case law based, and that's where it all is. And that is maybe more likely to be changed than legislation is.
We've had loads of people say that, yes, some cases are more important than others. And we've had someone say that cases can be used to help decide the results for new cases, which is judicial precedent, or even used to help the defendant emphasize their point. And some cases impact society and are more important. And someone else said, yeah, the weighting is different.
Yep.
Completely agree with all of these.
Yep, so I think we all kind of understood that. And also you have to make sure that you understand the higher court structure. So that if a decision is made in the UK Supreme Court, or as it was previously known, the UK House of Lords, you'll come across that as just what it was before I don't know when the UK Supreme Court came in, was it 2010?
It's 2005, after the Constitutional Reform Act.
Oh, right. Clearly couldn't remember that one. So they are going to be a lot more authoritative than a case that was in the Crown Court or the Magistrates Court. And also have tend to be more judges in those courts. Sorry,
some people have just said some stuff in the chat. Oh, this is very interesting. Someone said case law pervades the judgments made in English courts as consequences of the unwritten nature of the Constitution. Some cases enable the law to be an accurate reflection of society. It's very true. Very good point as well. As we said last week, the UK doesn't have a written constitution. And so case law, you can have what are called constitutional cases. For example, the Miller cases, which went through a couple of years ago, which are considered constitutional cases. And someone else said, oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that I think in England there isn't a written law for murder. Like it's only in case law. We haven't actually got it written down in legislation as an offence, which is interesting. And it's got a really old definition. Like it's very old.
You find that a lot when studying law, that like the whole offences against the Persons Act is very, very, very old. And someone else said both criminal and civil cases differ in weights. For example, in criminal cases, a murder case carries more weight than a traffic braking case, which is like what you were saying, Kelsey, about the very traffic laws may not be the exact same, or may not hold the exact same weighting.
Yeah, if you think about it, in a criminal case, it does tend to impact society a lot more, because in civil cases there are really two parties. So the majority of the decisions only really affects those two parties, but it can set a precedent, such as you'll see in the Donoghue case in civil law.
What can also happen is that a principle might be established in civil or in criminal, and that can extend to the other one. So a principle might be established in criminal law a legal principle that might then extend to civil cases.
I mean, yeah, there's also negligence. You'll find it in both criminal and civil law, but the definitions are a tiny bit different, I think. So you have to be careful which one you're arguing. So we'll go on to the next question if everyone's happy. So does anyone know the facts of Donoghue and Stevenson? I think this was in the
This might take a minute to type, I imagine.
Any brief facts, you can throw out some buzzwords.
Someone has said the events of the case took place in Paisley in Scotland in 1928. That's correct.
Yeah, very old case.
Very, very old case.
And very Scottish, not English.
Someone's jumping the gun and giving us the answer to number 5. Hold your horses. Someone said, while attending his store, Miss May Donoghue was given a bottle of ginger beer purchased for her by her friend. The bottle was later discovered to contain a decomposing snail. Donahue subsequently took legal action against Mr. David Stevenson, the manufacturer of the ginger beer. She lodged a writ in the Court of Session, Scotland's highest civil court, seeking £500 damages.
Yeah, very good.
And someone else said that the manufacturer owed a duty of care to the consumer.
We're really jumping the gun. Yeah, I've just got the basic facts. So yeah, there was a dead snail and a bottle of ginger beer that her friend bought her, and that she was not able to claim through contract law at that time because she was not a party to the contract because her friend had bought it for her. So the outcome of the case that Mrs. Donahue was awarded damages, and the ratio is that negligence is a distinct and there's several. It was a very big case. You probably didn't read the actual case report. You probably just read the textbook. But I think it's a 60-page case report, very long. We had to read it in first year. So it came up with several things. That negligence is distinct and separate in tort. Tort is like it's about when people's rights are infringed, I think, or privileges. So negligence is a huge part of that. A lot of the problems that you'll come across will most likely be with negligence. There does not need to be a contractual relationship for a duty to be established, and that manufacturers owe a duty to consumers who they intend to use their product, and the neighborhood principle was established. I think it was Judge Atkinson. He said, who then in law is my neighbor? The answer seems to be persons who are so closely and directly affected by my act that I ought reasonably to have them in contemplation as being so affected when I am directing my mind to the acts or omissions which are called into question. A very long-winded way of saying anyone that you can reasonably think would be injured if there was a failure to take care. So I haven't got an answer.
That quote will be burned on the inside of your eyelids soon enough.
So I haven't got an answer to the next question, but what does everyone think about the outcome of the case? It's kind of a subjective thing, and we come across this problem a lot. So are there any other like parts of your life that you think something that this might affect, not necessarily a drinks product? Anything else?
Whilst people are writing, someone's asked if we will take everyone through written submissions and presentation. I believe next week our lecture is on oral presentation. Is that right?
I haven't decided yet. I don't think.
Either next week and the week after, we'll be doing 2 lectures on oral presentation, so just speaking to the judge, and your written submission and your bundle. So we'll be covering that in the coming weeks. Don't stress about it. We'll make sure we take you through each part of it. But has anyone got anything to say on Donahue? What did they think of it?
The other thing I was going to mention, Scarlett, before to everyone before we look at the answers. For the people who weren't here at the start, Professor McLeavy said that we will be doing a mock moot, the 5 of us, next week. So that will get recorded. So that will give you, again, on top of the written submissions lecture we're doing, you'll also be able to watch a video of also moot, so you can kind of get some advice, some tips, and learn how it's structured. So that should, again, help you with how to prepare your written submissions as well. So that will be uploaded sometime next week.
I don't think we've got anyone desperate to weigh in on what they think. Someone said a mock moot, which would be really helpful. Don't worry, we'll get that sorted next week, and then you guys can watch it. As far as the outcome of the case, personally, when I first read it in first year, I thought, thinking about the neighbour principle, how does that apply to me? Who do I have a duty of care to when I'm just going about my daily life? Well, as Lord Atkin says, it's anyone who is so closely affected by my actions that I ought to reasonably have them in mind. It's quite interesting, something to consider, something that you don't necessarily have the law in mind when you're just going about your day with things like this. But it's a really interesting case.
So I think someone's already answered question 5, but if anyone didn't see it in the chat, anyone else can answer as well. A little sub question: did anyone know what we call the judges that sit in the Supreme Court?
The very clever person who answered that earlier also did that. Yeah, someone said justices.
Oh, second question on the Q&A.
Someone said there's 12 justices, correct? I'm just going to clear up, there seems to be a bit of confusion about what the bar is. The bar is it's like a term for if someone is at the bar or has been called to the bar, then they have been called to be a barrister or a lawyer. It's a legal term, it's not a physical thing. So when we say my learned friends across the bar, we just mean my opposing learned friends. But there are 12 Supreme Court justices. Well done.
How many sit in an average case? Is it 5 or 3, I think?
It varies. Does it not have to be an odd number?
Yeah, it does have to be an odd number.
Sorry.
We all knew that.
But in some really big cases, you can have 11 justices. So like in Miller, I think 11 sat. And in some smaller ones, you can have smaller. What you can also do, this is just a bit of background knowledge, is if I go to a court of first instance and the case is deemed to be in the public interest for it to be heard at the Supreme Court rather than a court of appeal, it can get fast-tracked to the Supreme Court instantly rather than go to the Court of Appeal and then the Supreme Court.
So I think in the Q&A we had a question about negligence in other areas of law. I know that, well, you'll find negligence in most areas of law because if someone's in a position of kind of authority or responsibility, they tend to have a duty of care. So that's how it comes in negligence. So there can be negligence and duty of care within other areas of law. But I know it in criminal law, you get, gross negligence manslaughter, which is a step down from murder, basically, where there was a gross disregard to their duty of care, or they breached it and it was so terrible. So like if a doctor had seriously made a mistake when he was treating a patient and it led to their death, that would be an example of gross negligence manslaughter. That's the only one I can think of.
Yeah, there are times as well exactly like that when some people owe a bigger duty of care or have a high standing in duty of care. For example, doctors are held to a higher standard for duty of care because what they're doing has more risk to it and things like that. Does anyone have any questions? You've all been very active in the chat and Q&A today.
Brilliant. Just before we answer some questions, guys, it's just to let you know that as of next week, we're going to be using a software called Menti. You can spell it. I'll just put it in the chat for people to find. It's just Menti. And what it is it's a way online where you can submit anonymous answers, and if you've got any points, and you can also do polls. So if we ask a question and we can say, do you think this is the right answer? Do you think this is the no answer? We can get some like graphs and stuff. So we'll be using that as of next week. So it might be an idea to have a look at it. The way it works is we'll give you a code and then you just put the code in it and it immediately lets you on. And it's free to use. You don't need to create an account or anything like that. So maybe just something to look into for next week.
Okay, just a couple of questions. So we got a question in the Q&A about which conditions of law be violated. I'm not entirely sure if this relates directly to negligence or any of the law, but some types of law can be violated by omission. So if someone never did anything, then they can technically still be liable. Some of the law requires positive action. In criminal law, you need kind of an action and also a mental element. So you need like intention or recklessness, something like that. I hope that maybe answered your question.
It's quite interesting as well. In English law, there's no duty. I think this is straying off topic from the question a bit, but in English law, there's no duty to act in good faith. If I walked past a pond and I saw someone drowning, I have no duty to save him. I can, however, make a contract with him right then, though. I will save him for a certain amount of money. But that's all down to my own ethics, really, isn't it? Someone else has asked for some clarification on the research. We'll be speaking about this a little bit more in the coming weeks, but to give you sort of some clarification, we will be so we'll ask you to do some research as far as finding cases and legislation. We'll give you the correct pages in the textbook where you can find some cases that will be useful, and then you can use them. When you get to a university level, you'll have to do your own legal research, but don't worry about that at the minute. What you may have to do is find how the cases are applicable. So if we give you a problem on duty of care, and then we give you a page that references Donoghue and Stevenson, you then have to apply it to the problem at hand. Okay, just some more questions.
So somebody has asked what makes certain case is persuasive. Aren't all cases brought before the court have legal relevance? And may, that's one word I can't pronounce, relevance, and may be binding. For example, if the case is brought before a superior court. So yeah, so what makes a case persuasive is you kind of got two different elements. Firstly, if it's a case which is held in the same jurisdiction, for example, if we're remembering how the structure goes, you have the Court of Appeal and then you've got the Supreme Court. So if it's a case from the Court of Appeal where they decided something and then the appellants bring it up in the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal's case will not be binding on the Supreme Court. It could be very persuasive. The Supreme Court may agree with the reasoning, but they aren't bound to accept it. So they're not bound to follow through with that case. Another different type of case is cases from different jurisdictions. Now, this is really important in the UK. So the way the UK works is we are a nation of 4 different countries, but we all have our own legal systems. So if there's a case, let's say in Scotland, that won't be binding in England, but the English judges might think it's really an important kind of step forward, or they may agree with it, to bring it into force in England and vice versa. So those cases aren't binding, but they can be quite persuasive. I think something really important though, and this isn't case law, this is statutes, but statutes are always binding on the courts. So the courts can never go, we don't like the statute, we're not going for it, we don't accept it, we're just going to ignore it. The courts can't do that. They always have to follow the statute. And sometimes actually you will find courts, they may make remarks and they don't agree with the statute, or they think the statute is wrong, they think the legislation isn't right, but they still have to follow it. So that's sometimes quite interesting.
So there was a question about what will we work in pairs? Will we be paired with people from our school or different? I'm not sure. We're not necessarily in charge of who is paired up, but I imagine it would most likely be people from the same school, just so you can work together, because it is quite difficult to work online. If that answers your question, but we will know more, and when we do, we will tell you as soon as we know.
Someone's asked, what do you have to do to become a barrister? It's not really our area of expertise, but in general, get a law degree to start with, and then there are some exams you have to take, and then you have to get pupillage. But honestly, my main advice would be get a law degree and get mooting as soon as you can. Chambers love to see students mooting. And someone else asked, what is a skeleton argument? We'll be going through that more in our lecture surrounding written submissions, but it's basically just a page that goes through the submissions that you'll put forward and briefly explains them, and just kind of lets the judge should be able to have a quick look at it and see, okay, this is what they're arguing, this is how they're arguing it, these are the cases they're using, I know what's going on with them now. But we'll go through that more as and when.
There was a question about how to refer to cases in criminal law. So Regina and the defendant or the Crown and defendant. I would always say the Crown and defendant. So I'm trying to think of a famous case. Is it the Crown and Brown?
Brown.
Brown, yeah.
That the one you said,
Sometimes
sorry.
you'll come across ones that say DPP and the defendant as well. That just means Director of Public Prosecution. But we'll be providing all the cases that you'll need to use, and we'll tell you how to pronounce them. So don't worry too much about that.
We don't see, sorry, I was checking I'm not on mute. We don't seem to have any more questions unless I've missed any. Oh, there's one in the chat, someone's asked, will we be issued with a specific case to deal with? We'll give you a problem that you'll have to work through, and in the workshops that we'll be talking more about in the coming weeks, we'll go through some problems with you. But we'll make sure we flag post all of the cases and legislation you have to use or might be good for you to use. If nobody else has any more questions, speak now. But if not, I think we might be done for today.
So yeah, either our lecture next week will be on legal writing skills and research, so that will involve the bundle, the skeleton, how to write your speech, and then the one after that will be presentation and oral and judicial intervention.
Someone has also just asked about presentation and what they do if they're naturally not a great speaker. I wasn't when I first started law school. I really was very nervous. It's something that you ease into as time goes on, but we will give you some tools to help as well. Just remember, try and speak as slowly as you can. You'll have a drink of water next to you. If you get asked a question and you really do not do not understand the answer, or you do not have thoughts going through your head, when you just freeze, then we can just take a sip of water, take it easy, ask the judge to repeat the question. I was going to say nobody's going to judge you. They are going to judge you on the moot, but nobody's going to judge you for not being an excellent speaker as soon as you begin. So don't worry, it's also just something you'll learn. And the same person has asked, if you say something wrong, what are you meant to say? So sometimes if you do say something wrong, the judge might correct you. You can say, I'm sorry, my apologies, my lady. This, for example, if I said a case was binding and then the judge told me that it actually wasn't, I could say, my apologies, my lady. Regardless, I still believe the principles in this case are very relevant to this court. Don't dwell on it. Don't let it, get to you. It's perfectly fine. Like, we all make mistakes. The judge will judge you more on how you recover from that rather than the mistake you make. And if you manage to bring it back to the law, for example, by saying the persuasive case is still relevant, then it'll really be of use.
So, so someone's asked, what do you say about being with people from other schools? Do you remember with our partners from our original schools, or how does it change? So the competitions, you will be working with someone from your own school. There'll be more information coming about that very soon. The rules will be coming out soon, but yeah, it will be within your own school. So you'll be partnered up with someone in your own school. Is there a prize you get for winning? I think the prizes, I'm not sure if they've been announced yet, but they will be announced very soon.
Yeah, we're not sure what they are this year, but I know there were some pretty big prizes last year. If you're worried about pairing, we're getting lots of questions about pairs. We don't know a lot about how the pairing will work just now, to be completely honest. But we'll get back to you more when we know more. We are still figuring out the whole internals competition, how we can work it. We'll get back to you more when we know more about pairings, but don't stress too much about it. We'll speak with schools about it as well, and we'll let you know when we know, like I say.
in our competition that we do at the university, we compare people up if they don't already have a partner, or we can allow them to name a partner. So I guess it's worth speaking with whoever your staff representative is, and letting them know if you would like to be paired up with someone you already know. But again, we're kind of not in charge of that just now.
Yeah, and someone's just asked at which point will the competition stop being virtual? Well, for this year, it will remain a virtual competition for the whole year. That's just because of COVID and travel restrictions and the like, and staying safe. So this year it will continue to be a virtual competition, but we ran virtual competitions last year and they were all really successful and they were really engaging. So don't worry about that. We'll make sure we'll try to replicate it as much as we can to kind of real life face-to-face moots.
A lot of actual real life courtrooms have moved online as well in the real world. So it's actually a very equally good experience to do a virtual moot as an in-person one, because you're getting that same experience of being in a courtroom. Is that all the questions? I think so. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. Someone's asked, what if the judge is just biased? That's a very good question. What happens in the society at uni is we will moderate everyone's judging. We'll have a look, check the scores are adding up, and look okay. The judge is unlikely to be biased, and it is one of those things where unfortunately you are going to have to trust them and trust their knowledge of mooting. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you present an excellent argument, then you will be fine, even with a biased judge, I'm sure.
So I think that's us all done today, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope it's been useful and interesting, and we can't wait to seeing you next week. So thank you very much, and hope you have a lovely rest of your week.